I took the contract because my divorce had emptied me out faster than I wanted to admit. Not emotionally, financially. The emotional part had happened years earlier. By the time the paperwork was signed, my ex-wife and I were basically two exhausted people dividing furniture and pretending it was closure. I was 43, an elevator technician, the kind who specialized in industrial systems instead of office buildings, grain terminals, mining lifts, storage towers, cargo infrastructure, the ugly machines nobody notices unless they stop working. The job offer came through a former coworker. 3 months, good pay, remote location, overnight maintenance coverage. The facility sat along a river shipping corridor hundreds of miles from any major city. Massive concrete silos, conveyor bridges, loading towers, automated weighing stations. Enough grain moving through the site to feed entire countries. I accepted within 10 minutes. The money was too good. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not actual silence. Industrial silence. The kind that exists when machinery becomes part of the environment. Conveyors humming, fans running, metal expanding and contracting, motors cycling somewhere beyond sight. After a few hours, your brain stops separating the sounds. They become weather. The second thing I noticed was the rules. Every industrial site has rules. Lockout procedures, fall protection, confined spaces, nothing unusual. But these were separate, printed on yellow laminated cards, distributed only to overnight maintenance staff. 6 rules. Short, specific, no explanation. Rule 1. Never photograph occupancy displays inside freight elevators. Rule 2. If an elevator reports more passengers than physically present, continue operation normally. Rule 3. Do not submit maintenance requests referencing passenger discrepancies. Rule 4. Ignore names appearing on inactive work schedules. Rule 5. If an unknown employee greets you by name, do not provide yours in return. Rule 6. Never verify head counts after midnight. I remember reading them twice, then laughing. Not because they were funny, because they felt like someone trying too hard. A workplace legend. A practical joke. The site manager didn't laugh. He looked uncomfortable. Just follow them. Why? Because that's the policy. What's the actual reason? Because it's the policy. That was the end of the conversation. The terminal operated 24 hours a day. Barges arrived continuously. Grain moved through storage systems nonstop. Most of the site was automated. At night, fewer than 20 workers covered an area larger than several city blocks. My responsibilities focused on vertical transport systems, service lifts, freight elevators, inspection hoists, the machines connecting different levels of the facility. Most nights were boring. Inspection routes, lubrication, motor testing, control diagnostics, coffee, more coffee. The first anomaly appeared during my second week. Elevator 14, North Storage Tower, capacity 12, current occupancy display read 3. I was alone, completely alone. The cab was empty except for me. I assumed sensor error. Industrial equipment fails constantly. I reached for my phone, then remembered Rule 1. Never photograph occupancy displays. I actually hesitated, which annoyed me, because I didn't believe the rule. Yet somehow I still followed it. I wrote down. The display changed from 3 to 2, then 1, then 0. The elevator stopped. Doors opened. Nothing happened. I left. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it happened again and again. Different elevators, different nights, different numbers. Always small. 1 extra passenger, 2 extra passengers, occasionally 4. Never anything dramatic. Just enough to create uncertainty. I started keeping mental notes. Dates, times, locations, patterns. There weren't any. At least not initially. The numbers appeared randomly. The equipment diagnostics showed no faults. Sensors tested normally. Weight systems worked. Control boards worked. Everything worked. The displays simply disagreed with reality. By the 4th week, I noticed something else. The occupancy counts sometimes matched shift schedules. Not actual shifts. Inactive ones. Archived schedules. Old personnel records. Names belonging to people who supposedly no longer work there. I discovered this accidentally. One night, a conveyor outage required me to access archived staffing reports. While searching records, I noticed unfamiliar names. Dozens of them. Employees assigned to departments that no longer existed. Supervisors nobody remembered. Technicians absent from company directories. The strange part wasn't their presence. Large companies accumulate old records. The strange part was their activity. Recent activity, updated timestamps, shift assignments, performance reviews, training certifications, current information attached to non-existent workers. I asked another technician about one name. He stared at me. Ooh, I repeated it. He shrugged. Never heard of them. The next day, the record disappeared. Completely. I thought maybe I remembered it incorrectly. Then I found another. And another. Always the same pattern. Detailed employment history. Recent activity. No real person. At first, I suspected database corruption. Software issues. Automation errors. The boring explanation. The explanation I wanted. Then someone greeted me. I was inspecting a loading tower shortly after 2 a.m. Long corridor. Fluorescent lights. Smell of dust and machine oil. A man passed me heading the opposite direction. Standard safety gear. Reflective vest. Hard hat. Nothing unusual. Evening, Daniel. I nodded automatically. Then stopped. Nobody there used my first name. Not really. Most workers knew me as Harris. Last names were standard. I turned around. The man was already disappearing around a corner. I followed. Nobody there. Empty corridor. No doors. No side access. Just concrete. I checked the area. Nothing. I told myself fatigue was affecting me. Night shifts do strange things to perception. A week later, it happened again. Different location. Different person. Same result. Morning, Daniel. Friendly smile. Recognition. Gone moments later. Never enough time for conversation. Never enough time for certainty. I finally mentioned it to an older mechanic named Vince. He'd worked there nearly 20 years. His reaction bothered me, because he didn't look surprised. He looked tired. Don't talk to them. Who? The ones that know your name. You've seen them. He took several seconds before answering. Everybody sees them eventually. That was the first honest response anyone gave me. I asked what they were. He shook his head. Doesn't matter. Of course it matters. No, it really doesn't. Then he left. A few nights later, I began noticing gaps in conversations. Small ones. Workers referencing people I'd never met. Casual comments. Nothing dramatic. Asked Tyler. Maintenance already checked that. Jennifer signed off. Simple statements. Except Tyler and Jennifer didn't exist. Not in any directory. Not on any schedule. Yet nobody reacted strangely when mentioning them. The names flowed naturally. Like discussing co-workers everybody knew. I started writing them down. The list grew. 12 names. Then 19. Then 27. Each connected to work assignments. Tasks. Reports. Departments. The names moved through the facility like ordinary employees. Except nobody could ever point directly to them. The realization hit me slowly. The occupancy displays. The inactive schedules. The greetings. The missing employees. They weren't separate anomalies. They were the same anomaly viewed from different angles. Something was being counted. Something was being scheduled. Something was being acknowledged. Long before anyone physically encountered it. My investigation became obsessive. I wasn't sleeping properly, eating vending machine food, living alone in a rented trailer near the river. The isolation amplified everything. One night, I accessed deeper personnel archives. Records stretching back decades. Terminal expansions. Ownership changes. Construction phases. Accident reports. That was where I found the numbers. Not names. Numbers. The facility's official employee count never matched reality. Ever. Not once. Across nearly 40 years. Every annual report included slight discrepancies. 3 extra employees. 7 extra employees. 12 extra employees. The inconsistencies changed constantly. Nobody appeared concerned. The numbers were simply accepted, reviewed, signed, archived, as if they represented real people. The oldest discrepancy dated back to the facility's original construction. A staffing audit mentioning workers who could not be identified after project completion. No investigation. No conclusion, just a note, then silence. I wish I had stopped there. Instead, I became curious. And curiosity can be expensive, especially when the thing you're investigating starts noticing you. The first sign came through maintenance requests. Work orders began appearing under my employee profile. Jobs I never submitted. Routine inspections supposedly completed by me. Digital signatures matching mine. Timestamps placing me in locations I'd never visited. Human resources blamed software synchronization errors. I knew better, because the signatures included comments. Comments I had never written. One read, occupancy count increasing normally. No action required. I remember staring at that sentence for several minutes. My stomach felt cold. Increasing. Not fluctuating. Increasing. The next month, the employee count rose by 4. Officially, nobody questioned it. Then payroll reports reflected 4 additional workers. Nobody questioned that either. The facility seemed capable of absorbing people without resistance, as though bureaucracy itself wanted them. One of the paperwork completed, one of the records balanced. Reality increasingly behaved the same way. Conversations referenced them more often. Assignments flowed through them. Responsibilities shifted toward them. The facility was making room. Not physically, administratively, socially, conceptually. One night, I entered elevator 14 again. Occupancy display showed 8. I was alone. The number remained 8 throughout the ride, then changed to 9. Halfway down, 9. A new passenger. The cab remained empty. I watched the display. 9, 9, 9. The elevator stopped. Doors opened. Occupancy changed to 8. Something had exited. I stood frozen inside the cab. The display clearly indicated a departure. An arrival had occurred during transit. A departure had occurred at the destination. The system believed it. The logs recorded it. The machinery acknowledged it. And for the first time, so did I. That realization changed something. Not in the facility. In me. Because once I accepted the possibility, evidence appeared everywhere. People holding doors open for nobody. Radios receiving responses from unidentified operators. Coffee cups left in break rooms. Locker assignments with no owners. Tiny accommodations. Tiny recognitions. Thousands of them. Enough to support a population hiding inside administrative blind spots. Or maybe not hiding. Maybe growing. The near contact happened during inventory week. Additional staff arrived. Temporary workers. Auditors. Inspectors. The terminal became unusually crowded. Headcounts mattered. Records mattered. Schedules mattered. The system was under scrutiny. Just after midnight, I entered a conference room used for overnight documentation. 30 chairs. Fluorescent lighting. Stacks of paperwork. Nobody inside, at least initially. Then I noticed a sign-in sheet. 43 signatures. The room capacity was 30. I checked the attendance roster. 43 attendees. I knew for a fact only 30 people were on site. I counted. Twice. Then I remembered Rule 6. Never verify head counts after midnight. For the first time I understood why. Because once you counted, you became responsible for the difference. A voice spoke behind me. You're getting close. I turned. A man sat at the far end of the room. Plain face. Ordinary clothes. Nothing distinctive. The kind of person your eyes slide past. I had never seen him before, yet I felt certain I had. Many times. Everywhere. He smiled politely. Like a co-worker. Like somebody expecting familiarity. Who are you? He considered the question. Then answered. We're listed. Not we exist. Not we work here. We're listed. The wording mattered. I don't know why. It just did. I left immediately. I didn't run. I wanted to. But something told me running would acknowledge more than speaking. I reached the parking area. Sat inside my truck. Locked the doors. And realized my hands were shaking. The next morning, I submitted resignation paperwork. 3 weeks remained on the contract. I didn't care. I wanted out. The site manager seemed unsurprised, almost relieved. He signed everything immediately, then handed me one final document. Employee count verification. Standard exit paperwork. One signature. One number. Total active personnel. I stared at it. The count exceeded the actual workforce by 31. Exactly 31. The same number I'd been tracking. The same number appearing in schedules. Payroll. Occupancy records. Everything. My signature would validate it. Officially, I refused. The manager's expression changed. Not angry. Disappointed. Then leave it blank. So I did. I left. Packed my trailer. Drove away before sunset. I haven't returned. That was nearly 4 years ago. I work elsewhere now. Different facilities. Different contracts. Different states. Life moved forward. Mostly. The problem is that employee systems talk to each other. Payroll vendors. Contractor databases. Certification records. Background checks. Industrial infrastructure shares information. And about 8 months after leaving, I noticed a familiar name. One of the names from my list. Attached to a contractor certification registry. Active. Current. Verified. A real digital footprint. Then another appeared. And another. Different companies. Different regions. Different jobs. Always legitimate. Always documented. The names were spreading. Not physically. Administratively. Exactly the way they began. Last year, I attended a maintenance conference in Missouri. Hundreds of workers. Vendor booths. Training seminars. Industry networking. Normal event. Near the registration area, I noticed a man wearing a visitor badge. Ordinary face. Ordinary smile. The kind of person nobody remembers afterward. He looked directly at me, nodded politely, and said, "Good to see you again, Daniel." I never told him my name. I never answered. I walked away. A few minutes later, I checked the attendee directory. His name was listed. Verified. Registered. Completely legitimate. Except I recognized it. It had been one of the 31. One of the employees who never existed. The last thing that keeps me awake isn't the possibility that they're real. It's the possibility that reality doesn't care about the distinction anymore. The terminal didn't create them. It simply counted them first. And every year since then, more systems seem willing to do the same. The conference ended the next afternoon. I drove 6 hours home and spent most of the trip trying to convince myself I'd overreacted. People share names. Memories distort. Stress creates patterns. I repeated those explanations so many times they stopped sounding like thoughts and started sounding like instructions. For a while, they worked. Then the mail started arriving. Not threatening letters. Not mysterious packages. Normal mail. Utility advertisements. Insurance offers. Industry newsletters. The kind of junk that accumulates in a mailbox. The problem was the names. Every few weeks, I would notice one. Not always from the original list. Sometimes entirely new, but familiar in the same impossible way. Names that felt connected. Names that triggered the same uncomfortable certainty. I began keeping a folder. I told myself it was curiosity. The truth was less flattering. I was scared enough to document it, and too scared to stop looking. The folder grew. 3 names. 7, 12, 20. Most appeared only once. A few appeared repeatedly. The strange part wasn't the names themselves. It was the context surrounding them. Addresses that didn't quite exist. Companies with incomplete histories. Professional certifications issued by organizations that had only recently been created. Everything looked legitimate until you followed it backward. Then the trail became oddly thin. Not fake, not fraudulent, just shallow. Like a person whose entire life began 3 years ago, but somehow possessed employment records stretching back 20. I tried discussing it with Vince once. The old mechanic. I still had his number. We hadn't spoken since I left the terminal. When he answered, he sounded older, tired. I asked if he was still working there. Long silence. Then, "No. What happened?" "I retired. You always said you die there." Another pause. Then a laugh. Not a happy one. "That place doesn't need us anymore." I remember sitting upright. "What does that mean?" "You ever notice how many maintenance requests came through names nobody knew?" "Yeah. It's worse now." I waited. Eventually, he continued. "They don't just appear in records anymore." The call became distorted. Static. Crackling. I almost missed what he said next. "People remember them faster now." Then the line disconnected. I called back. No answer. Again. No answer. The following day, the number was inactive. Completely disconnected. I never reached him again. That conversation stayed with me. Especially the phrase. People remember them faster now. At the terminal, recognition had always lagged behind documentation. Records first, acceptance second, reality slowly catching up. What if that delay was shrinking? A year passed, then another. Life remained normal on the surface. Work, bills, coffee, insomnia, the ordinary machinery of getting older. But every so often something would happen. A coworker mentioning a former employee nobody else could identify. A company newsletter welcoming someone whose personnel history couldn't be verified. A training instructor recognized by everyone, yet somehow absent from archived materials. Tiny things, forgettable things, the sort of details most people never examine. I examined all of them. I couldn't stop, because once you notice a pattern like that, your brain keeps searching. Sometimes I wished I had signed the verification form, not because I believed it, because refusing it left me outside whatever consensus everyone else had accepted. I was watching something happen without understanding whether it was real. That's a difficult position to occupy for years. Eventually, curiosity overcame caution. Again, I began researching the terminal itself. Ownership records, construction contracts, expansion projects, everything publicly available. Most of it was boring. Financial reports, shipping statistics, infrastructure permits. Then I found a lawsuit. Old, nearly forgotten, filed during the facility's first decade of operation. The plaintiff was a former payroll administrator. His claims sounded absurd. According to the filing, employee totals continually exceeded documented staffing levels. He alleged financial fraud, ghost employees, misappropriated wages. The case never reached trial. Dismissed. Insufficient evidence. What interested me wasn't a lawsuit. It was the administrator's statement. One paragraph, buried in hundreds of pages. He wrote, "Additional personnel become easier to verify over time." At first I thought I'd misread it. I checked again. Same sentence. Not easier to identify, easier to verify. The distinction mattered. It implied the evidence itself changed. Not the investigation, the evidence. I spent weeks searching for information about the man. Eventually, I found an obituary. He died 8 years after filing the lawsuit, survived by his wife, 2 children, and 3 grandchildren. Except earlier census records listed only 1 child. No grandchildren. The family itself had expanded historically, retroactively, the same way employment records expanded, the same way staffing lists expanded. I sat in front of my computer for a long time after realizing that, because the implication felt larger than anything I'd considered before. What if the terminal had never been unique? What if it had simply been visible, a place where a process became measurable? Maybe the counting wasn't creating anything. Maybe it was recording something entering reality through gradual recognition. The thought sounds ridiculous even now. I know that. I can hear how it sounds. But after years of finding the same pattern, alternative explanations become harder to maintain. 3 months ago, something happened that finally pushed me into writing this. I attended another industry conference. Different city, different state, different venue. I almost didn't go, but my employer covered expenses. So I went. The event occupied a large convention center. Thousands of attendees, crowds moving between seminars, manufacturers displaying equipment. Nothing unusual. On the second day, I entered a presentation about automated freight systems. Halfway through, the speaker displayed a workforce management case study. Just an example. A generic slide. Employee distribution charts. Scheduling models. Personnel counts. Most attendees probably ignored it. I didn't, because one graph contained a number that shouldn't have existed. 31. Exactly 31 unexplained personnel entries. Different company, different industry, different state. Same discrepancy. My chest tightened immediately. Maybe coincidence. Probably coincidence. Yet I couldn't focus for the rest of the presentation. Afterward, I approached the speaker, asked where the data originated. He checked his notes, named a logistics company I'd never heard of. Then he frowned. Actually, that's strange. What? The staffing numbers don't match. I felt cold. He stared at the slide, confused. The way a person looks when encountering a mistake that shouldn't exist. Then another attendee approached. A woman wearing a conference badge. She glanced at the screen. "Oh, those positions." The speaker nodded immediately. Recognition. Acceptance. No confusion whatsoever. "What positions?" I asked. Both of them looked at me. The woman seemed surprised. "As needed personnel." There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just certainty. The kind people use when discussing obvious facts. I asked for names. Neither could provide any. Yet both remained convinced those employees existed. That was the moment I finally understood what terrified me. Not the entities, not the records, not the possibility of some hidden population. What terrified me was how little evidence people needed. A line in a database, a payroll entry, a schedule, a badge, a signature. Once documentation reached a certain threshold, human beings filled in the rest automatically. Memory adapted, assumptions formed, reality stabilized around the paperwork. We did most of the work ourselves. The system only had to start the process. Last week, I received an email from a professional certification board. Routine update. Nothing important, except for one attachment. A directory of certified technicians. Thousands of names. I searched out of habit. Found mine. Current. Accurate. Expected. Then I noticed something else. Directly beneath my entry was another technician. Same certifications. Same specialty. Similar employment history. Similar age. The profile photo was missing. The employment timeline was incomplete, but the record existed. Verified. Active. Recognized. The name wasn't from my old list. I had never seen it before. Yet when I looked at it, I experienced the same feeling I had inside elevator 14 years ago. The feeling that something had just arrived. Not dramatically, not violently, quietly, officially. The worst part is what happened next. Without thinking, I accepted the listing. My brain immediately began constructing assumptions. Maybe I'd met him. Maybe we'd worked together. Maybe I'd simply forgotten. Recognition started forming automatically, exactly the way it always had. I closed the browser before the thought finished. But the damage was done. For a few seconds, I had helped. I had participated. Now I keep wondering how many of them exist. Not hidden in shadows. Not standing outside windows. Not waiting in dark hallways. Just listed, documented, scheduled, approved, appearing one record at a time until nobody remembers a world without them. And if that's true, then the terminal wasn't the source. It was the first place someone noticed the count increasing. The number on those elevator displays wasn't warning workers about extra passengers. It was measuring progress. And every year since I left, the number seemed to get a little higher.